Gideon, thank you so much for being here today and for being willing to be our first person. Thank you.
Thank you. I do a fair amount of speaking, and I'm always amazed that people applaud you before you start to speak. You clearly don't know what torture you are in. Let me just remark that if you want to take a nap, please do. These strong lights do not enable me to see anyway if you are awake or not. The only thing I ask is no snoring.
Germany invaded Poland on September 1st, 1939, beginning World War II, and then soon they dominated Europe. But your home country of Slovakia was allied with Germany, and therefore it was not occupied by the Nazis until much later. Before we talk about the start of the war and the Holocaust and the events that led up to the German occupation of Slovakia, start first, Gideon, by just telling us a little bit about your family and their life and their community before the war.
Okay, when people ask me where I was born, I tell them Czechoslovakia. And they ask me, where you raised? I say Slovakia. That place in Europe changes names and countries very, very often. Slovakia was created by the Germans when the so-called enlightened Western powers signed the Munich Agreement, giving a rule over Europe to a bloodthirsty dictator. And Slovakia was created under a rule of a fascist party and was allied with Germany and adhered to the German persecution of Jews and so on their own. Sometimes we equate the Holocaust with Germany. Let me tell you one thing about the Slovaks. They paid the Germans a large amount of money for every Jew that the Germans took away to be killed. So my feelings about the Holocaust are not limited to Germany.
Gideon, tell us a little
But
sorry.
in everyday life, I was a small child. I didn't feel anything but the fact that being Jewish, I couldn't go through certain streets because the kids would throw stones at me because Jews were not supposed to walk in those streets. But other than that, I had a normal childhood.
Gideon, tell
If
us,
being afraid to your life is normal, it was quite normal.
your father was a
Now,
remarkable...
my father was a very preeminent personality. He was part of what was later in history called the Working Group, which was an underground organization trying to save Jews and communicate with the fascist government. There is a book about him called To Deliver Their Souls. The museum ran out of copies, and they don't consider it a good business to reprint things about the Holocaust. There's no big market for it. So the book is out of print and can be acquired on Amazon and places like that.
Your father was highly educated. Was that unusual for the time?
It was very unusual. My father graduated from a rabbinical school and was ordained a rabbi. And in parallel to that, he finished a secular university and gained a doctorate in German literature. So being a rabbi and having a secular education and at the same time also being a Zionist was very, very unusual. He was an unusual man. And when you read his memoirs, which are available on the site of Yad Vashem, but you have to be multilingual to read them. They are written in 6 different languages.
And he goes back and forth between the languages in them, doesn't he?
And you go back and forth.
Yeah.
Most of the body of the memoir is written in German, but the documents are written in the original Hungarian or Slovak or Yiddish, or sometimes Hebrew. So he was an unusual man and did unusual things. For a rabbi to be involved in the religious life of a Catholic country was not usual. But he was very much involved and did some things that, if you go back and think about it, I shouldn't be proud of, but I'm still proud. In order to endear himself on the government people in then fascist Slovakia, there was one minister in the government who was responsible for the Jewish question and whose life ambition was to be a well-known academician, to which he didn't have the right talent. But my father wrote him a doctoral dissertation. So you would say, how moral is it for a rabbi to cheat? And the answer is, it's not very moral, except when after the war you read testimonial by hundreds of people who were saved by this action of my father.
Gideon,
So, judging morality and actions in the time are very difficult. When I was a child, they said the only thing I knew is that children will throw stones at me, but I didn't feel it. And until 1944, as I said, Slovakia created under the Munich Agreement, which took Czechoslovakia and cut it into little pieces, giving a piece to Germany, giving a piece to Hungary, and giving one piece to be independent Slovakia under the German influence. In any case, growing there, I didn't know very much.
and
I was just a child.
I want you to say a little
Until
more.
one day, let me note, my father was a rabbi, had a long, flowing beard. So one day I come home and I see my mother, the wife of a rabbi, hugging and kissing a man I have never seen before, which is not a very regular action for a wife of a rabbi to do. And I didn't understand what I am seeing until the man opened his mouth, and I understood that it's my father who shaved his beard not to be recognized, because it was very clear that the time came for us to flee the place. When you look at the map of Europe and you have some military background or interest or understanding, you will understand that the Germans really could not afford to let Slovakia to be under non-German influence, because it would cut Europe into 2 parts and cut the German army into 2 parts. So they had no choice but to invade Slovakia. And they did. And they did by proxy, as a matter of fact. What they had a Ukrainian battalion fighting on the side of the Nazis as part of Waffen-SS, which was the military arm of the elite Nazi SS. And they invaded and started to proceed from the south to the north. It was clear that if they will catch us, there will be no due process, there will be no Miranda rights, and all the nice things we in this democracy are so accustomed to. They would just take us and kill us unceremonially. So my father understood it, so he took my wife, my mother, my sister, and myself, and put us in an ambulance and sent the ambulance from the city toward the German lines, the German advancing army. And nobody would check to see who is in the ambulance if it's going toward the Germans. Mm-hmm. They would not suspect that there are Jews in there. And that's how we fled from this city we were in. And eventually, when we were out of the city, we left the ambulance, which broke down anyway, and started to walk through the mountains to the center of the uprising. That time
I'm going to ask you to go back a little bit, Gideon. Tell us about the uprising. Who was involved in the uprising and why Banska Bystrica was the center of the uprising?
That's very interesting. You know, the political situation, the political history of that part of the world at the time, in 1944, is interesting. It was already after the Normandy invasion. But in Europe, there were fightings not only between the Germans and the partisans, but also fighting between communist-leaning partisan and Western-leaning partisan. Banska Bystrica was the center of uprising in which miraculously both groups cooperated, and we fled to come there. We fled through the mountains.
Did your father go with you when you fled to the mountains?
No, our father left us because it was clear that if we are caught together, we will be all killed.
And because he was so prominent.
Yeah, he was very prominent, very well known. He fled separately, using his contacts with the Christian hierarchy, and was able to flee.
And you described to me that for you, because you were a 7-year-old boy, that the trip fleeing to the center of the uprising was for you sort of like an adventure.
It was a great vacation. We went through the mountains, we ate currants and wild strawberries, and were fed by the shepherds, fed some cheese and milk by the shepherds. I didn't know that we are in mortal danger. Mm-hmm. Only it's often my mother would talk to the shepherd, and they will tell us, don't go this way, go that way. Because they knew where the Germans are. So eventually, after this almost 1 week beautiful vacation in the mountain, we came to Banska Bystrica, the center of the uprising. Yep. Because of my father's prominence, his wife, my mother, and us were very nicely accepted by the community in Banska Bystrica. And we stayed there until the Germans, going from south to north, started to threaten that particular city. In the meantime...
Before you tell us about leaving there, what was life like for you in Banska Bystrica?
It was very good.
It was very good.
You know, the community really likes us.
Yeah.
The wife of Rabbi Frieder was somebody of value for them.
Did your mom know where her husband was?
No.
No.
We didn't know anything about my father.
Yeah, okay.
All we knew that he is somewhere else and we are here. And my mother befriended some Jewish partisans, especially one by the name of Adam Herzog. And when the Germans came close, she contacted Adam Herzog, who agreed to take us with his partisan group as they're fleeing from south to the north. And we were fleeing in a caravan of partisans and refugees when in a mountain pass called Stare Hori, we were caught by the Germans in a strafing attack with Stuka airplanes.
Stuka planes. Yeah. So they caught you in this pass.
They caught us and everybody else. Yeah. And there was a big massacre there. A lot of partisans and Slovak civilians were killed. And my mother and my sister were killed, and I was wounded. And Adam Herzog, this partisan, found me standing next to my mother, trying to wake her up, because when she was shot, she died lying on her back with her eyes open. And I couldn't understand why I cannot wake her up. So he took me from there and said, she will come later, which obviously never happened. Mm-hmm. And here, where the story diverses, the way I remembered all my life was that he took me from that massacre and took me to this little hamlet called Bully. Later on, he wrote his memoirs, and I was instrumental in publishing them. And I discovered that my memory is incorrect. He did take me from that massacre, but not straight to the village, but to the mountain with his partisan group. Now, very quickly, the partisan realized that a wounded 7-year-old is not a proper part of a partisan group. So they decided to take me to a village and placed me with a Catholic family in the village.
Gideon, can I interrupt for just a second? Before you tell us about when you were taken by Henry Herzog to the village and your life there, I want to ask you a couple of things. Do you remember, because you were so young, do you remember anything about either your mother or your little sister?
Very, very little.
Very little.
And what I remember, I don't rely upon. Mm-hmm. I try to find other sources, because the memory of a traumatized, wounded 7 years old is not that reliable. But I survived. I was brought to this family, and they cared for me and kept me alive, endangering their own life. The house next to the one I lived was searched by the Germans, and they found a partisan there. So they doused the house with gasoline and burned it with the partisan, with the whole family. That was the way of life then.
Gideon, tell us, so Henry Herzog, after you spend a little time with his band of partisans, he takes you into this little tiny village. How did he select that? Do you know how he selected that village and how that family said, oh, we will take this wounded child?
Well, here is again where there is a divergence of memories, feeling, and fact. He took me to that village for the simple reason it was the closest village. He took me to this particular house because it was the house at the edge of the village.
So closest village, closest house.
Yes. Yeah. So he knocked on the door, and I'm sure he looked quite frightening with the grenades hanging from him, a submachine gun, and possibly unshaved. And what I remember is, and I always remember, that they accepted me lovingly and fed me and cleaned my wounds and got somebody to bandage them. But in his memoirs, he wrote that he and his partisan friend came to that house and told the people that here is a wounded Jewish child. His father is a very well-known guy. The war will be over. He will come and take him and reward you. Take him and keep him. And if you will not take him and keep him, we will kill all of you. Now, given that choice, they had very little choice, did they? But I don't remember this part. All I remember is that I felt wanted and loved and being taken care of by these people. I am very, very happy to tell you that very late, only now, they were recognized as righteous among Gentiles, and they are long dead, but their grandchildren will be given proper recognition certificates in January, in the coming January.
This coming January. Is that right?
And I am,
That's wonderful.
and I'm very proud. I'm sorry that it took so long. What happened is when I was taken from Banska Bystrica by this partisan, each time he met a Jewish partisan, he will tell him the wife of Rabbi Frieder was killed, but his son survived, and he's in this village with this family. Eventually, even before the end of the war, my father was caught and put in jail, and in jail was another Jew who heard the story. So my father knew about my survivor and about the death of his wife and child before the end of the war. Toward the end of the war, he was able to flee and found shelter in a Franciscan monastery. The Franciscan knew about him because he was so involved with the religious life of Slovakia, and they saved him. And after the war, he sent emissaries to take me away, and he took me from this family, and a year later he died. So on his deathbed, let me just go back one step. After the Holocaust, there was an epidemic of marriages. I cannot describe it anyway. People wanted to rebuild their lives, and they married, especially my father had this little child myself, but he was very busy again in public life, so he married a woman which also lost her husband. And so I had a stepmother. When he was on his deathbed, he died for a reason that at the time we did not understand. Now we do a bit more because we know far more about medicine than in 1945.
Gideon,
So-
can I take you back to the time with the Strihacek family for just a few minutes? First of all, you've shared with us that you were wounded. Tell us about your wound.
The what?
Tell us about your wound. When your mother and your sister were killed, you were wounded. That was serious. Tell us about that.
I was wounded. It's kind of funny to say that I was lucky when my mother and sister were killed. I was wounded, but I was lucky with my wound. I had 2 bullet wounds, but neither of them shattered a major bone or severed a major artery or damaged a major nerve. And at that time in Europe, little boys didn't wear long pants. Little boys wear short pants, but it was very cold. So boys, girls, doesn't matter, wore woolen stockings. And when I was wounded, my stockings were saturated with blood, but it was very cold, and the blood coagulated almost immediately, creating a pressure bandage over my wound. And that's how I survived. So I came to that family. They found that in that hamlet there was another Jew hiding who was an ophthalmologist. So the ophthalmologist is also a medical doctor. He took care of my wounds. And that family nourished me and kept me alive for 7 months until the place was liberated by Romanian soldiers fighting as part of the Red Army, Communist Red Army.
What were the conditions like with the Strihaczyk family? There was a very simple existence in this little village. What was your life like?
Well, the Strihaczyk, the family which took me, he was a cobbler.
Okay.
And I should have brought with me, I have some artifacts I took from the house. And I helped him in stringing the yarn for felt shoes. And all in all, I was just a child there.
Were there other children there with you?
There were no other children.
It was just you.
The funny thing is, funny, I remember that the woman was very fat. Later I discovered that the woman was very, very thin, but she was expecting. And when I left in May, she gave birth to a daughter I never met at the time. I met later on. And that is a long story in itself.
Yeah. Did they gave you an assumed name, a false identity, didn't
Yes, they gave me, when I came, they did two things. First, they gave me a very Slovak-sounding, Christian-sounding name.
Jan Suchi.
Jan Suchi,
Yeah, Jan Suchi.
which was kind of funny. Jan is the Slavic version of John, and Suchi in Slovak means dry. Very common last name, but I was anything but dry. I was dripping wet and I was bloody. And they taught me something, and they told me, when a fascist will come to you and ask you, say this is what you say. And I didn't understand what they said. It was kind of some kind of mantra, flow of words. I didn't understand a single word. And I didn't know what it was. But it's so often a fascist will come and tap me on my shoulder and say, Boychik, say this, and I would give him the mantra, and he would kind of strike my head and said, very nice. And I didn't know what was this magic sentence which saved my life. Until very, 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 very many years later, I came to United States. Let me start. When my father was on his deathbed, he told my stepmother, take my child away from this bloody continent and bring him to Israel. And she did. And I grew up in Israel. And Israel was in constant fight for its life, and the communists were on the other side, were anti-Israeli. So I could never contact Slovakia, which was under communist regime. So I never contacted the people. Eventually, Slovakia became independent, became part of Czechoslovakia, a non-communist, and I was able to go there and try to find the people who saved my life. They were dead. They died. Natural death. But I found that they had a daughter which was born 1 month after I was taken away from them. In the year I was taken away from them, on a little piece of paper torn from a writing block, I wrote in my childish handwriting, "Thank you note for the family, for saving my life, wishing them a happy new year." When I came to visit in Slovakia, I found out that this woman kept this note. Their parents told her about me, and they told her that if she ever meets me, she should treat me as her brother, because they intended to keep me as their son. But I was taken away by my father, who died a year later, and I moved to Israel. In Israel, I devoted myself. Well, for me, in Israel, for me, the Holocaust did not exist. I didn't read about it. I didn't talk about it. I didn't watch movies. But I did decide that I do my best to see to it that the Jews will not be put in that situation again. So when I graduated from high school, where everybody goes to the army, I was given the opportunity to join a unit in which the people could go first to a university and then go to the army. I was lucky to be admitted, and I finished my undergraduate degree before I joined the army. And when I was about to join the army, I was given the opportunity, instead of running up and down hills and shooting holes in the air with my rifle, they told me, you can either do regular army duty or join this organization which is doing weapon development. And it took me all of half a second to join the organization. So I spent all my formative time in Israeli Ministry of Defense Weapon Development Authority.
Gideon, tell us, one of the things you were going to tell us is that line that saved your life, the one that you didn't understand. You're coming to that, okay, yeah. Okay.
So eventually I went back to visit the family, found that they are dead, but I found this piece of paper that she kept, and the woman wanted to give it to me. I said, I'm not going to take it. This is a sacred document for your family. But I did have a copy. I intended to bring a copy with me, but I did not. I have a copy of it, which I took. And I have it. So I came back, and Slovakia is now independent, and I am a dean in George Washington University. And Slovakia is independent, and they have an opening of an embassy. And they invited me, and I hesitated, because the flag of the new Slovakia is almost identical to the flag of the fascist Slovakia. Almost identical. Not exactly. But I hesitated to go. but I was a dean, and my public duty was to promote the university and to find students. So eventually I decided I'll go. And because what happened was an unbelievable metamorphosis. This little stinking Jew, Gideon, me, now became Professor Dr. Dean Frieder, a very respected Slovak. So being just a piece of trash in Slovakia, now I became a respected Slovak scientist. So I went to the opening. Slovakia is 85% Catholic, 15% Protestant, and 0% everything else. So it was not surprised that in the opening of the new embassy, they invited a Catholic priest from Slovakia to come and give the opening benediction. So I was there in the audience, and this guy, the priest comes and says a couple of polite words in English, and they say that he has to apologize because his English is not good enough to do the benediction and everything in English, so he will switch to Slovak, which he did. And when he opened his mouth with the benediction, it was like a lightning struck me, because what he was saying were exactly the words I remembered as this blur mantra, except this time it was uttered by an educated man, and every word was clearly enunciated and separate. And I realized that what I understood, what I didn't understand, was just able to recite, is something important. I just don't know what it is. So after the ceremony, I came to him, and in Slovak, I asked him, can he tell me what did he do, what was his benediction? And he said, oh, this was the Lord's Prayer in Slovak. And suddenly I understood the words.
And that's what the Strihacic family had taught you.
The what?
That was what the Strihacic family had told you to say
Yes.
to save your life.
They taught me because it was very clear to them
Yep.
that every little child will know the Lord's Prayer. As a matter of fact, in the 40s, the Catholic faith used Latin, but there were always three things which were taught in the language of the country, from which most people knew two, and some people knew part of the third. And the three things, the first one was the Lord's Prayer, Our Father, which is probably the most Jewish part of the Christian liturgy, the Lord's Prayer. So they knew the Lord's Prayer in Slovak, they knew Hail Mary, and the more educated, which was very, very small minority, knew the Nicene Credo. I believe in Jesus Christ. But most of them didn't know that. And they recited it as part of a Mass. But that was done in Latin and not in Slovak.
Gideon,
So,
I want to ask you one more thing.
so
if you
that,
can. Yep.
that prayer saved my life.
Yep.
Just to show you the intelligence of these highly uneducated but superbly intelligent people who understood how to care for a Jewish child, and understood that everybody who wants to be believed to be Christian had to know the Lord's Prayer. Over the years, I took effort to study the Lord's Prayer, not only in English and Slovak, but also in Aramaic, which was the original language used by Jesus.
Gideon, I want to ask you two more questions before we turn to our audience. One, the Strihacek family that took care of you and nurtured you until your father was able to return and get you. Why do you think no one ever informed anybody that you were there, that you were hiding in their home, which would have had disastrous consequences for them? Why do you think no one ever said there's a little Jewish boy, not only a little Jewish boy, but the son of a very prominent Jew?
I don't know. For me, it's a miracle. Mm-hmm. I have a very religious friend. When I told him this story, I said it was a miracle. The friend says, nonsense. There's no miracle there. It was all preordained, so that many years later you can be part of the Ministry of Defense and care for your people. It was all preordained by God. It was not a miracle. And you were brought to that particular family for a reason. As a matter of fact, when I'm on the subject, eventually their daughter had a stroke and was paralyzed in half of her body. And the financial situation of the family became very dire. It was before Slovakia joined the European Union, so a couple of dollars for them was king's ransom. Mm-hmm. So I told them, I'm going to send every month some small amount of money in dollars, small for me, but significant for you. And the daughter said, no way in heaven. I said, what do you mean no? Your parents told me that they intended to keep me as their son, and we would be siblings, and siblings care for each other. And she said, no, if I accept money from you, it means that my parents saved you for a benefit. They didn't save you for a benefit. They saved you because it was the right thing to do. And I, during all my life in my scientific work, I dealt with logic. And I have a couple of basic articles in logic, which are even today still quoted as being very important. And I thought to myself, Gideon, if you, with all your knowledge of logic, cannot convince this woman to accept your help, then everything you have done through all your life is just crap written on paper. Here is the time where your logic should shine, to be of value. So I asked her name was Anna, I asked Anna, do you believe in God? Well, asking Anna, do you believe in God is like asking her, are you breathing? I said, obviously you do. I said, so how do you know that God didn't bring me to your parents just so that now, in your time of need, I'll be here to help? And she did the only thing that a woman like her could have done. She told her daughter to go to the village priest and ask him what to do. And the 10-15 minutes between the time the daughter went to the priest and came back, for me were like 10 centuries. But eventually, the daughter comes back and says, the priest said, we mortals really don't understand how God operates, but what the man said makes sense. Take his help. And till she died every month, we sent a small amount of money, which for me meant that we skipped dinner in a restaurant once a month to give money to this family. And I thought I did the right thing. She eventually passed away. And now her parents were recognized by the Yad Vashem Museum in Jerusalem as righteous among Gentiles. And I'm very proud and thankful.
And that'll be this January, this coming January.
It's coming
That's
January. I don't know if I'll
wonderful.
be strong enough. I am a man on a leash, as you see.
Gideon,
Strong enough to go. I hope I will be.
let's take a couple of questions from our audience. Do you feel up to that? Let's do that.
Yes.
If you have a question, we ask that you use one of the two microphones. There's one in each aisle. Try to make
Just
your...
remember, I finished my doctorate a long time ago. So do not ask questions about quantum electrodynamics.
and I ask that make your question brief, and then I'm going to repeat it just to be sure that we hear it correctly.
I just wanted to ask, in a country that is becoming so politically and ideologically divided right now, what is your advice to us to not separate ourselves from each other and label each other Democrat, Republican, conservative, liberal? What's your advice to us to not do that?
What's your advice to our audience about how we live with each other in divided times? What's your advice for us?
Live with each other. One of the most beloved presidents we had in this century in this country was President Kennedy. And he was quoted to say, "The hottest places in hell are reserved for those who in time of need kept their neutrality." Evil can prevail only if the good people are silent. So when you see injustice, act. Don't just sit there. And don't wait for it to come to you, to harm you. Act each time you see injustice to correct it. Each time you see hatred, act to counteract it. And don't promote it and don't tolerate it.
Thank you, Gideon. Thank you for that.
Let's hope
We have another
that
question.
if we all are not, if we all speak up when we see injustice, not only to us and to our group and to our people, but to everybody, that eventually injustice will disappear. Evil can survive only if the good people let it survive. I am not very optimistic either. But every place I can go and help and do things, I do.
Okay.
I'm not always lucky to be able to do it, but it's often I can come to a community and do some good. And the people in the museum, who are my handlers, so to speak, know that if there's a request from a Jewish organization, they will not send me. They will send somebody else, because there are enough Jews worrying. I like to go to organizations which are non-Jewish, which are non-white, which are non-native here. And there are various funny things which happened if you go there. When I was a dean, I found out that we don't have enough Native Americans in the university. So I sent the guy who was my head of recruiting to go to an Indian reservation. So he went to an Indian reservation, Native American reservation. When he goes to the tribal head and tell him I came to recruit people and I would like to meet people. So the tribal heads asked him, is 6 o'clock a good time for you? And he said, yes, it's a good time. So the guy comes to the meeting house at 6 o'clock and there is absolutely nobody there. Around 6:30, 7, some people drop in, including the tribal head. So he asked him, you said that 6 o'clock is a good time. There was nobody here. He said 6 o'clock was a good time. They just didn't come. So sometimes things don't go exactly as the way we want them. But that's not a reason not to try. That is a reason to try harder.
Let's take one more question, Gideon. Thank you very much. And you'll get a chance to ask Gideon your question, though, afterwards, and I'll say more about that in a moment. Yes, sir.
So I have a question. Is there anything you want us to do to remember the Holocaust? Because I know that Holocaust survivors are kind of dying off, and it's our last chance to see people speak about it.
Okay.
Please remember, I am an old man with problems of hearing.
I'll repeat it for
So
you, Gideon. Yep.
The question will be repeated.
The question is, as you know, there are not that many survivors left, and we'll have fewer, soon. What advice do you have for us to remember the Holocaust? Because I think the gentleman's talking about how important that is to remember it, and your advice about how do we remember the Holocaust?
The best way to remember the Holocaust is not to be passive. When you see evil done, be active. Act. Don't let it happen again. Because if we don't act, it will happen again. Think about it. Think about it. What are the causes of things like a Holocaust? First of all, don't believe anything I tell you, because I'm not an expert on the Holocaust. I'm just a rambling old guy telling you what I think. But in order for a Holocaust to happen, a couple of things have to be there. There has to be an identified group of victims. Okay? This is the group which we want to eliminate. This is the group we want to suppress. There has to be another group of perpetrator, people who believe that that group to be eliminated should be eliminated. And the third part is that those perpetrators have to have the technology, the capability, financial, organizational, governmental, moral, whatever, to do it. And look around yourself. Are the conditions for new Holocaust ripe? Are there groups which are uniformly hated? Are there other groups which would like to eliminate those groups? And do we enable them to have the means to do it? And if we have haters and have victims, but we will eliminate the capability of the haters to do what they do, then we did what we have to do. But whatever you do, do. Don't just sit idle. And don't rely on others to do it for you. Okay?
I'm going to turn back to Gideon to close the program in just a moment. I know at least one person had a question and others may. When Gideon's done, we invite any of you who want to come up on the stage. Gideon will stay up here. And if you want to ask him a question, then please do. If you just want to shake his hand or have your picture taken with him, we welcome you to do that at the end of our program.
And you know, I am paid by the question. So more questions you have and more discussion you want, I am paid more.
So it's worth coming up and asking him some more questions.
The truth of the matter is that I am paid by your presence. I would not be able to survive what I did go through lately without the support of the people in the museum and without the feeling I have when I meet a group like you. There is a hope in seeing you. And by the way, thank you for not snoring.
We hope you'll come back to another First Person program. We'll continue through August 8th. All of our programs are available through the museum's YouTube channel. It's our tradition at First Person that our first person gets the last word. And so I'm going to turn back to Gideon for his last word. And I mentioned at the beginning that his son, Ophir, was honored recently in Europe. And I have a hunch we're going to hear about that. Gideon.
Okay. I'll talk about it, although it may be improper. It's boasting, but I will do it anyway. But in any case, I'm very lucky to be able to meet people like you and to draw from you strength to continue. Because I know there is hope if so many of you are sitting here. And by the way, about sleeping and snoring, when I was in the University of Michigan, that was an era where computer science was booming, and the introductory classes were overflowing. So one year I was teaching the introductory class in a large auditorium. And on the first row on the right, this young man would come. He came for every lecture. He would sit down and go to sleep. And slept throughout the whole lecture. From all the 100 or so people I had in the class, I didn't remember a single name, except I want to know who it is. And the nice thing about it is that he got a straight A, in spite of sleeping. He just knew everything. So don't feel bad if you slept a bit. The goal of the Holocaust was to eliminate the Jewry of Europe. And they did big strides toward achieving the goal, but they didn't achieve the goal, luckily. And this March, I had the opportunity to essentially say, all you Nazis failed. Not only the Jews are still alive, but the Roma are alive, and all the other groups you persecute are alive. And what happened last March, my son, who is a scientist, with whom I have common papers, and we have common patents, but he's far better than I am. He was elected to be a member of the European Academy of Arts and Science. And the inauguration into the academy is done in their headquarters, which is in Salzburg, Austria. Now what's special in Salzburg, Austria is that on the border with Germany and on the other side of the border are the Bavarian mountains and a special resort called Berchtesgaden, which was the favorite place of Hitler. So from this Hitler's place you could see the university. So here there will be an inauguration, and my wife and I go together to the inauguration. And we are sitting there. The inauguration is conducted in 3 languages: English, Latin, and German. English because everybody speaks English, Latin because the documents are written in Latin, and German because it's Austria, which is the native language there. So my son is called to the podium to be recognized, and my wife kind of nudges me. And I turn to her and say, "What's wrong?" She said, "Nothing." He said, "Do you hear the noise?" I said, "What noise?" I said, "All the Nazis turning in their graves." That the Jews is being inaugurated. And to make things even sweeter, he is inaugurated, he's sitting down, and another man is called, and a second man is called, and the man comes to the podium. He is recognized for he's a professor of medicine in Oxford, and is recognized for his contribution to medicine. But he's an African man from Uganda. And I nudge my wife, and I tell her, "Listen, you see they are turning to the other side now." Not only they inaugurated a Jew, but here is a black man being inaugurated into one of the most prestigious organizations in Europe. You Nazis really did not succeed. Evil doesn't always succeed, and people of goodwill will prevail. And just to add to my boasting, last month my son was elected to the European Academy, Academia Europeana, which is very unusual for non-Europeans to be invited. And again, the feeling of you failed with all what you tried to do to eliminate, you did not succeed. The good prevails and is rewarded. And it's in your hands to continue it. When you see good things to be done, do them. When you see bad things to be, which may happen, object to them. Okay? And believe that good things matter and act for them. Sorry about boasting about my son, but I'm very proud.
Thank you, Gideon. Thank you.
Thank you.